to have you on the Unstacked Startups podcast, and really excited to get into this because you are a multiple time founder, you're an entrepreneur, you're an engineering leader, a tech executive. And I think that we're going through, obviously, a monumental shift in the way that technology interacts with the world and in how engineering orgs are built and how products are built. And I can't wait to get your opinions and thoughts on so much of this. So, Matt, where do we begin? Maybe let's start with yourself, your background. Where are you coming from, and how did you end up at AppDirect?
I started programming when I was 9. I was doing contracting for the federal government when I was 12. So I was like one of those kids. And since then, I've founded and sold 3 technology companies, and all in the software infrastructure space, except for the last one, which was Sproutlink, where we made a wearable baby monitor that would build a statistical model for each baby and do things like predict when she would wake up from a nap. We sold that company to Mattel, and I joined AppDirect right after, partially because I wanted to work on a software only solution, and partially because of I believe in really like betting on decade long trends. And I think that SaaS and subscription commerce was definitely one of those 10-year trends. It's funny because I've actually been at AppDirect a little over 10 years now, which is the longest I've ever worked anywhere, and the longest that I've been committed to one enterprise, and it's been really interesting scaling up. When I joined, we were at uh, uh, a, a, a 20 or 30 million in ARR, and now we're over a billion, and it's really been quite an interesting ride.
So, Matt, you've taken multiple companies from zero to something. Some of these companies have been acquired. You're leading today at AppDirect, an engineering organization inside a $1 billion plus ARR business. Um, what does a serial technical founder see inside a large org that might be a little different from a more standard VP engineering, SVP engineering track? Are there threads you can pull on having that entrepreneurial background that you think is a little different?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because you see a lot of different kinds of operators at scale. I think like the things that are more uniting is that like the customer is still like the only ground truth.
Mhm.
I like to say that there's nothing like a customer. At scale, you tend to get filtered signal from customers, and it's filtered through PMs or support tickets or dashboards. And as a founder, you kind of learn that you have to instinctively like short circuit that and go right to the customer, see their experience, like watch them struggle, resist explaining the solution or the answer. I review escalations directly, all of them that I can get my hands on. I treat complaints as like kind of a privilege because it's like the worst things to not hear from a customer. That's usually what happens right before churn, right? And I'm trying to connect engineers on the team to talk to customers without that translation layer.
Arguably, arguably even more important today. In a curious to get your take, and we'll dive deeper into this later in the conversation. But in an AI-driven world where software engineers are, you know, um, leveraging AI and are spilling into the work that a traditional PM might have done years ago, or everybody needs to have that customer hat on. What is the customer? What's their true problem?
And in an AI world where like building things isn't really the bottleneck, the speed of decision making, the founders got the ship it, iterate instinct. Decisions are generally reversible by default, and maybe some of them aren't, but most of them are. And scale is going to quietly destroy that like speed of decision making if you let it. And at the same time, I think that there's also like as you iterate faster, there's also a tendency to try to optimize for the current quarter. But as a founder, you've got to have like the long-term view, like the multi-year payback window. And so you have to kind of be faster, but think in terms of longer bets. And most technical decisions at AppDirect are made kind of bottom up. But we could greenlight an aggressive migration to Cursor with real spend before we could prove the ROI. And it looked a little crazy, but the trend was real. And so it was like, yeah, we're going to switch to this. You guys can thank me later.
Mhm. I love it. And how did it pay off? I know you guys have been an early adopter of AI and weaving it into the organization and co-pilots and everything else.
We have the numbers to prove it. I think in general, the foundation models have really improved like since December. And I think by the end of the year, it's going to be really unusual to see people that are writing code by hand. Already like our default is AI built software. And through last year, I think by the end of last year, we were at like 90% of our PRs were AI assisted, and that led to like real improvements in throughput. We've been able to complete like double the number of epics, uh, quarter by quarter that we were before we were using AI. And the team has grown a little bit, but it's nowhere near doubled.
Yes.
And at the same
Yes.
time, like we've seen a faster cycle time. Where our issue cycle time is like cut by 33% for most projects.
Amazing. Incredible. So Matt, when you joined AppDirect about a decade ago, give or take, I imagine the engineering team looked very different than it does today. I imagine today that engineering org is more global in nature. What's the difference of, you know, leading an engineering team that's global, that's maybe larger than it was 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, like, engineering has changed a lot, and I think that, right now and for the last few years, we've been going through a science fiction level advance in engineering, which is, like, the most exciting thing that's happened in software development my entire life. There's been a few different waves and cycles. Our team right now is hundreds of people. We're in a dozen countries. We have a few major centers in places like Canada, Argentina, the United States, and India. And there's things that work and there's things that break at scale. I think like some of the things that worked have been DevOps as a culture rather than a role.
Mhm,
We have DevOps and quality champions, and they're distributed across the organization. That idea of like shared responsibility and culture scales, but like specialized gatekeepers doesn't really scale.
mhm,
One thing that we've done that's worked is we have a single quality score that measures quality for each team across 5 pillars: security, reliability, performance, responsiveness, and issue or bug detection. And it's the same scoreboard everywhere. If you're in Argentina or France, it's the same. It's comparable, it's transparent, it's scoreable. Like very different teams have like different issues around quality that they want to improve. And this gives them kind of the flexibility and the ownership to do that. We've also adopted like a common operating cadence where there's a roadmap, a spec, a tech design, operations, and like AI has accelerated that, but we're not throwing out parts of that we've developed over a decade to build quality software. Just happens a lot faster, and that autonomy, like each team owns the autonomy inside that cadence.
mm,
And probably the most important thing now is like investing in writing that like specs, design docs, architecture docs, run books, like asynchronous writing helps teams that are in many different time zones. And it's the closest thing to a universal language. And it's also, now the highest leverage thing for AI tools as well. I think the things that break are more around like communication channels that grow in a combinatorial way, right? So 150 people has like an org has 11,000 different channels. And so like we have to actively like prune. I think that culturally, like leveling and feedback, and it's just different country by country. What feels like normal direct feedback in Montreal like might sound harsh if you're in Pune, and it's like a more human leadership area to lean into. And then we've acquired at AppDirect, we've acquired I think 9 companies in the last 14 months. And those acquired teams come in at definite, like very different points on the technology tree, right? So,
yes.
one company had no CI/CD pipeline and was doing manual deployments, and then another company was serverless first on AWS. With a billion events per month flowing through their event bus. So same kind of business, totally different stacks.
I mean, talk about complexity, right? In the sense that it's multiple geographies. You're going through this massive shift in terms of AI literally changing how software engineers get things done. and technical teams get things done. And AppDirect is acquiring companies. So then there's the integration piece to that.
I think like the most surprising thing was just how quickly disparate places like Buenos Aires or Hyderabad or Montreal became kind of indistinguishable in talent quality once we had invested in tooling. And the time zone overlap is usually like the first thing that seems like abrupt, but that's really more about like meeting etiquette more than meeting count. Like the teams that thrived really were religious about just written content and asynchronous artifacts compared to shared meetings.
So, Matt, we are going through a colossal shift in so many different respects. I think that society hasn't seen quite yet how massive this colossal shift via AI will be. I'd love to jump into it with you as it pertains to your org, how you're building your team, how you build solutions for your customers today. How do you do that in a scalable manner, in a productive manner?
Yeah, so I think again, science fiction level advance, and I think that we have all of these preconceived notions about software that are kind of built into the way we think, and they're built into the culture. Like it's like software is slow to build, and it's very fragile, and it's built manually, and a lot of that's not true anymore. And there's all of these second order effects that flow from that I don't think like everyone's internalized. And I think there's examples like why does software have so many settings? Well, especially enterprise software, it has so many settings because it's like you want to bring everything that the software could possibly do to your customer and then let them turn on things as they need them when you need them. But if those prerequisite things aren't true anymore, like maybe if you need dark mode, you could just build dark mode when you need it or whatever it is, And I think that there's a lot of things like that we're still discovering.
I think I read somewhere, I don't know if it was a blog or AppDirect went from 0% over 90% AI assisted pull requests.
The transition to go like all in on a single tool, this was slower to start than people think. Like, at first, like there was legal and IP risk,
Sure.
and senior leadership really pumped the brakes on this. And we had started using GitHub Copilot in 2024, and it was a useful experience. People used to autocomplete. We saw like 30% suggestion acceptance, that kind of thing. And then when we started using Cursor, I guess in February of 25, we standardized that and rolled it out org wide by March. And we really saw like an inflection point uh, around September. The frontier models crossed a usefulness threshold. We were able to solve the training and education problem at scale. Like most problems are around training and education. And we saw our AI spend really accelerate because it became worth it. All in on getting like we don't have a spending cap. Like we want people to use the tools like as much as they can. It's like if we were a construction company and we discovered a crane, we wouldn't just be using the crane on Monday and then the rest of the week, oh no, you got to carry it up the stairs. Like we want our engineers to use it as much as they can. And so yeah, by December we saw 92% of PRs were AI assisted and about 60% of merged lines were AI generated by that point. I think that like the proliferation of AI coding tools is kind of a trap. Like every additional tool at a scaled organization brings like security exposure. There's procurement and legal costs. That's like gotta be someone's got to do that stuff. There's no shared muscle memory for tooling, and probably the worst one is that it's just hard to measure adoption across a million tools. So we picked one and we went all in. We built our own dashboard around like tracking adoption, accepted lines, code ratio, and we wired AI use into our engineering rubric, how we evaluate engineers. We have the framework of different levels of AI engineering capability. And what we've seen is that like most people are able to get to like level 2, which is sort of like a basic agentic workflow where they're prompting an agent and they're getting lines changed, but most of the advantage really comes to get when you get to level 3, which is more around delegation and you're using plan
Okay.
mode and the AIs are really building complete features. And then level 4, there's a few people like the top performers are there, and that's really orchestration where you're spinning up agent swarms that are running in parallel. And I've been doing this myself, building a product, and I can do maybe like 5 to 7 concurrently, and then there's diminishing returns after that. But I have seen some other systems like Gastown and Paperclip and Symphony that are really organized around like getting to like 20 or 50 concurrent agents, which seems really interesting.
So maybe fill me in. I'm not a software engineer, although today I can actually build stuff via Claude Code. It's unbelievable. I don't know
Yeah.
if you'd want to hire me. I probably wouldn't cut the mustard, but folks today talk about orchestration. Um, what does that mean? And how does a company like AppDirect at your guys' scale, how do you weave it into what you're trying to do while maintaining quality of work and fill me in?
Yeah, so the development methodology around orchestration is generally described as spec-driven development, is what we call it. And this is to contrast from like vibe coding, right? So with spec-driven development, you're doing the same process in terms of you're writing a spec that describes the problem you're solving for a business customer, and then you're building a tech design that addresses that, and then you're building an implementation plan that executes the tech design. But you're just doing it with agent orchestration. So the agents are creating these documents, refining the documents, very important, and then actually doing the execution. And it becomes more a matter of building like a system for managing this flow of information and context between different agents than actually like working on a feature. For one project that I'm building, you know, it's not really small anymore. I don't know, it's about 250,000 lines of code. And for every 3 lines of code, there's 2 lines of documentation that's been generated, and about half of the code is tests. So it's building and designing systems to do that at scale, where you're connecting end to get customer requirements and business goals, and then managing the context that flows between the different agents.
It's the whole system. I mean, think back to, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, one human needed to sit at the computer and write lines of code with their fingers.
We're going to be telling kids that, yeah, you know, we had to like type syntax and symbols by hand, and they're not going to believe us, you know. But to me, this is just another abstraction layer. And I used to write like 6502 assembly, and I was like excited if I could get two numbers to multiply, you know. And then we had 3GLs, 4GLs, like SQL was a big abstraction layer. There was this thing called RAD, or rapid application development. And you know, each time they were like, well, business people can write their own systems now. You know, won't need build people to build software. And you know, to me, this is just like another abstraction layer. And you know, frankly, it's one that should have been there the entire time. I mean, like once
Mm.
you start building software this way, you like you really feel like, well, this is probably the way that it's supposed to be, you know.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
to my kids, it's like, yeah, you tell the computer what it's supposed to do, and it does it. And like, you know, what else would it do? You know, it just seems natural to them.
Yeah. It's just absolutely fascinating. I mean, you know, you think of engineering orgs as humans sitting at desks, collaborating, coding, et cetera, et cetera. And today you have agent organizations, essentially, to some degree, and systems to get things done for you guys in the most efficient manner. And I think that playbook it's being built right now
Yeah.
before our eyes. Um,
Yeah, I
you
would say
know,
it's being discovered. It's interesting because at scale, we have all of these different tech stacks that some came in through acquisition, and some have different customer segments. And you know, there's no one factory that's going to solve these problems for every group at AppDirect. We kind of have to discover it team by team. I think that, you know, the implications for talent are really interesting. Like what we hire for now is a little different versus 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was like strong language and framework fluency, algorithms and system design depth, navigating large code bases, and execution on like well-scoped tickets. And today it's like all of that and specification skill and critical review at a systems level, and the ability to like engineer context, manage like rules, architecture, and prompts to get the right output, like being comfortable with delegating things. You know, it's really changed our interview process, which is interesting. Product and architectural judgment and taste becomes like even more important. You know, if you go to someone that was working like without AI, like, you know, a few years ago, and they were comfortable just like taking the specification and creating an implementation, it's like, well, that's what the models do now. You know, like the models and the harnesses, like that's kind of what you get now. So it's like, like the human in the loop has to bring something to the equation, and like empathy with the customer or architectural judgment or taste is definitely part of that.
what do the software engineers do today when AI is generating 90% of the code? And I think that largely answers the question. Humans become, dare I say, more human, more creative, more critical thinkers. They spend their time more on shaping and taste, and as opposed to writing lines of code. I think it's fascinating. I think that that skill set is in many ways more complex. Now, a software engineer at AppDirect kind of has some flavors of a product manager and maybe a designer and maybe an architect and an engineer all in one.
Yeah, I mean, what AI does is it really blends these roles, and you see, more people building things that have never built software before. And the same way on the engineering side, you see engineers with more of an opportunity to lean into product definition or design or quality, in a way they've never been able to. And what I think that'll help do is it'll be a core skill change for who enters the profession. The barrier to building useful software moves more to people that can really frame problems clearly. And it selects for like things like product instincts and empathy and clarity of writing, clarity of thought. More domain experts can directly enter software development through the agent path. People who never learned syntax or method signatures, but can write tight specs and know how the business should work. And I think the barrier also rises for people whose like primary advantage was like typing really fast or memorizing method signatures really well. So those skills are now like table stakes or commoditized. And so I think like computer science education has to change a little bit. Like there were a lot of
Sure.
boot camps. Like you've been like through enough eras, like you remember a couple of boot camps, and they would teach like syntax first. Like I think that is obsolete now.
Yes.
It's more like around problem decomposition, system design, and critical reviews. I think, one of the reasons our engineers can move so fast using agents to build things like backend services or front end applications is that they've built many of them by hand. So they know like what good looks like in good
Yes.
patterns. And I think that if you were building new kinds of software architecture and you hadn't done that before, it'd be a lot harder.
Matt, I think I read something about you talking about a wood racket analogy. What does that mean? Are you talking about a tennis racket? I remember my grandfather used to have literally wood tennis rackets hanging up in the garage. What does that mean in the context of
Yeah,
technology,
so
AI?
if
Yeah.
you follow tennis, like modern tennis has changed like quite a lot. It's like, Wimbledon now, like they play like they're 2 meters behind the baseline and they're sending forehands at like 100 miles an hour. And but you don't have to play that way, right? Like you can play tennis like however you like. You could use a wooden racket if you want to, but you won't win at Wimbledon. And software development is kind of running the same reel at 100 times the speed.
The tools that you put in people's hands make a massive difference. And this AI in the hands of smart software engineers is quite the tool to the point that it feels like a paradigm shift.
I tend to agree. I mean, like you can get into trouble with it if you don't know what you're doing. Like
Sure.
you have to be able to evaluate the output, right? Otherwise, it's like you become a slop cannon. like, but like I think that interesting tooling is kind of part of like what I find exciting, and carbon fiber hockey sticks or something like that. I think that'd be a lot of fun to play with.
We talked about how software engineers today that are leveraging and using AI, their role is blurring, expanding into other traditional roles. Where does this put you on the spot here? What does the engineering organization look like a few years out from now? How does human talent, play a role in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that engineers can carry more scope, and an engineer that's like fully at level 4 orchestration can really is really more of a manager where they're using the system that they built to manage entire teams of electronic superintelligences that are summoned at will. I think that the implication is that the org design becomes flatter and more porous. I think for other engineering leaders, the unit of leverage kind of shifts from like the team you hire to the system that you build. Rule files, architecture docs, playbooks, critique loops, measurement dashboards, like they're more like common artifacts of engineering leadership now. And so uh, the organization like will be less around like managing managers, managing engineers, and more like designing the system where fewer, more leveraged engineers can operate in effectively. And I've seen companies that are placed best on this already. Some companies are probably going to overshoot this and break themselves, but I think the ones that get it right will have a structural advantage.
Are they product managers who can code, or is that too reductive?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're more like founders. right? If I was a founder and I was hiring, like making engineering leadership hires right now, I wouldn't hire for someone that's going to optimize the team that we don't have yet. I'd be like looking for what people have built lately. And I think that like it's super important that like engineering leaders are like themselves builders. The tools are changing so rapidly, and like I said, like we're kind of discovering what works the best. And if you're not in that game, then you're not going to be like able to tell other people how to do it.
It's kind of like how you talked about the customer in terms of knowing what you need to build truly. What are their problems? You need to be close to the customer in order to lead your team, to manage your engineering team.
Yeah, like there's like what works and what doesn't, and there's what people talking about, but like you're gonna need to have opinions about it. We need to hire great people. We need to set direction and build culture and own quality and defending engineering seat at the strategy table. The craft is changing and it continues to change. And I think that's what makes engineering exciting. But the job is still the job.
There's a fear among maybe more junior engineers that AI eliminates entry level work. Are you seeing that play out at AppDirect?
I don't think AI really replaces engineers. It replaces engineering work that wasn't very well leveraged anyway. Like the job kind of moves up the stack. And I think that, one thing is like super clear is like there's going to be a lot more software. And if software is your business, that's a good thing. When you lower the cost of something and you lower like what it takes to create it, you wind up with like way more of it. And it does mean that like certain things become more important. Like having a really complex system is maybe less of a moat, but distribution and to some like complicated business practices like regulation, like those also continue to be moats. AppDirect is largely a distribution business, so like I feel like having more software to distribute would be good for us.
It's interesting how you kind of mentioned that you still need to hire great people and you're still building culture. Therefore, you still need people who are humble, who are positive, who are intense, who have high ownership. I think all those values that are core to AppDirect, they stay the same, even more important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, and if you're building a startup right away, like the first engineering hire, like really sets the values for everyone that comes after, right? And AI for better or worse, like it accelerates everything, right? So it can also accelerate the propagation of bad habits.
Yeah.
So yeah, the you want to surround yourself with the best people.
Is there is there a question that you think every founder out there, could be for an earlier stage company, that they should be asking about AI and hiring right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like you should be testing people's orchestration instincts in the interview. Like, take a real engineering problem and ask like, how would you decompose this into like parallel lanes of work? Where would you put the human in the loop? And I think that answer would tell you a lot.
Best analogy you've ever used to explain a technical concept to a non-technical person?
I am always looking for good analogies. Yeah, and I've seen a few ones. The sports ones are always great. There's tennis. There's the basketball game has changed a lot. But the one that I use for really AI enabled engineering is self driving cars. Now, I live in San Francisco, and I take Waymos. I was in the beta program. I've been in like thousands of hours in robot cars, right? But most places in the world that I go, it's like still treated as some kind of like crazy tech moonshot. And, it's like once you ride into one and you understand that, no, you can get from A to B that way, it kind of changes differently. It changes the theoretical becomes like mundane, right? And I think that that's kind of what's happening with software engineering and the ability to actually have code that's written by agents be the norm. And, not every part of the industry is going through that the same way yet, but they feel differently, like once you've done it for real.